What's up, y'all? You kicking it with the Junkyard Dog on junkyarddogs.com. My name is Tony, and this week we're going to be doing part 2 of our T5 transmission series. So this video we're going to be doing disassembly of the T5. So I'm going to show you guys, the components, things to look out for, how to identify problems, and some of the differences in the T5s, and also what's happening inside as you're going down the road. Okay, so first video we showed you guys how to pull them from the junkyard. This video we're going to show you how to disassemble a T5, and the next video after this one we're going to show you guys how to reassemble the T5 the Junkyard Dog way. Alright, let's get cracking on it. The T5 transmission is one of the best bang for your buck transmissions available on the scene these days. You know, they can be found often in like Mustangs, Camaros, Jeeps, S10s, S15s, pickup trucks. Some Isuzu trucks too, just to name a few. The company was originally known as Borg Warner, but was later purchased by a company called Tremec. The T5 is a medium-duty trans that's been known to take a thrashing before breaking down. So this is a world-class T5. You can tell by the bearing right here that it's a world-class T5. Usually the T5s that are not world-class will have like a more round-looking kind of bearing, and this one has, it's actually written on it Timken or Koyo sometimes. That's how you can tell primarily that it's a world-class unit. Another way for you to tell that it's a world-class unit is this little button right here. This is for the reverse synchro. Okay, so once you see that button there, you know you have a world-class unit. That's another way, but a lot of the world-class units, especially in the 5.0s, don't have that that button right there. So first thing we did was make sure there was no fluid in the trans. So what you do is you'll take a 3/8 ratchet, just like this, okay? And see this little ratchet area here, this is the little 3/8 connection here, will fit directly into the plug hole, okay? And you just loosen it. This is already loose because I drained the fluid. And just make sure that there's no fluid in there, okay? It's a good way to inspect, kind of give you a precursor as to what's going on inside. Because it could be, metal shavings in there. It could be silver. It could be black because it hasn't been changed in a while. Stuff like that. Okay, first thing I'm going to do is remove these 4 bolts with a 13mm socket. So there's 1 here, 2, 3, and 4. This is called a bearing retainer. This holds in the input shaft and houses the bearing that the input shaft rides on. So after you remove the 4 bolts that hold the retainer in, okay, you just take the mallet and give it a good whack here on the tip. That's to break the silicone seal, okay, because it's got silicone behind here to keep the fluid in. You just rock it and slide it off. Okay. Now you want to be careful here to not lose the race or the shim. Even though we're going to re-shim this when we put it back together, and I'll explain what that is later. This shim that's in here is usually a really good starting point if you plan on rebuilding the same trans. So that's the bearing retainer. This is an aluminum base bearing retainer. It has a pretty nice seal in here, a different style of seal. I don't particularly like these styles of seals, but here's the bearing race, and here is the shim. It's a pretty thick shim. Okay. Now we move to the input shaft shown here. This is the part of the trans that goes into the back of your crank and rides on the pilot bearing. Now, this area here must be smooth, meaning there's, this part here actually, and this part here must be smooth. So there's 10 slots here, okay? They're called splines. These slide into the clutch disc on installation. So to remove this, you want to tilt the trans forward and grab the input shaft while you rotate and pull forward. There's a cutout on it that will allow you to slide it out of the case, as you can see. Okay. The reason why I say to tilt it forward is because there is needle bearings inside here. Here's a needle bearing retainer. Okay. And then there's these needle bearings on the inside. And if you don't, then they fall off in the trans. Even though we're taking out a part, that's just not what I want to do right now. Okay. For those of you wondering why is he not wearing any gloves, I don't have any gloves in here this morning. Okay, so yeah, oh well. This is an input shaft. Okay, after it's been removed. The reason why we rotate while we are taking it out is for this cutout right here. This cutout was designed to clear the counter shaft inside the trans to allow you to remove it. The reason why I showed you guys how to remove the input shaft first is because this is the part of the trans that differentiates, well, the primary part of the trans that differentiates between a 4-cylinder T5, a V6, and a V8. Okay, this here is the almighty 8793 T5 V8 setup. You can tell by the thickness of the shaft, the height of it, okay, and the amount of teeth. This is a 4-cylinder. As you can maybe tell from the picture that this is thinner here. It's a thinner diameter, and the bearing here is different, and it's got a different tooth count. Now this is a V6, which is the tallest of all three, because the V6s had the SN95 set up with a deeper bell housing, so they gave it a little bit more length to still allow it to engage with the pilot bearing. Now, if you had a V6 trans and you wanted to change it to a V8, there's great news. You can take this input shaft out and install this input shaft, no problems at all. Unfortunately for you 4-cylinder guys, you cannot take this input shaft out and put in a V8 input shaft. It will not work. They do not match up. These bearings here are the ones that take the most force in the trans. They get the hottest. So guys, always, if you're going to get some bearings for the input shaft, get the best bearings you can, which are either, in my opinion, Timken or Koyo. And if you can, get it treated as well, okay, by cryo heat. Because the reason this is the part that takes the most abuse, the most torque when running your trans, okay? So definitely want to make sure that that's in good shape. Now, some of you may still have the shifter still on the trans. Usually I don't have the shifter on the trans because I get them from the yard and they try to charge more for it. But very often these are removed with 4 13mm or 1/2 inch sockets, which I'm going to use a 13 now. Now, to get this off, you have to use a little bit of prying action. You want to be careful because you don't want to damage it. This comes off. See, all the bolts are out, but still won't come off because there's silicone under there keeping it sealed. So Tremec has come up with these little tabs here that allow you to kind of stick the screwdriver right under here and pry it up and break the silicone seal without damaging anything. Okay, there it is. Okay, and this trans has definitely been upgraded a bit because there's some parts in here that have been changed. One of them being this brass shifter cup. That is not stock. They do not come with brass. They come with plastic. This guy intends on driving this trans really hard, so boom, there we go. So you're gonna take a ball peen hammer and a pin punch. I have one here that I had to turn down a little bit, and you're gonna drive out this little pin right here. Okay, make sure you guys wear safety glasses. And there it is. Okay, it'll bottom out. It will not come all the way out because it's got to hit the base of the shifter cup here. But you drive it until you see it moving like that, and it's going to make a kind of a clanking noise, a different kind of sound, and let you know it's bottomed out. All right. and then you stop right there. Now we're looking at the back of the trans, and what we're going to remove is these 8 15mm bolts that hold the tail shaft, which is this rear area, to the main case. 1, 2, 3, there's one in there, 4, and 5, 6, 7, 8. Now that we've removed the 8 15mm bolts and punched out the retaining pin here, we're able to now pull the tail shaft from the T5. This is also held on a little bit by the silicone that's in between the case, the main case, and the tail housing. So on the tip here, you're going to take your mallet, once again, and you're going to go ahead and give it a tap right up here, okay? You're just going to do it a couple times to break the seal. Now you see, it wants to come off, but it won't come off all the way because of this. So what you got to do is you got to pull up on this at the same time. Okay, be careful because there's a ball that's going to come out. Okay, spring, spring. Be careful, there's going to be a ball that comes out. And pin. Make sure you take that pin out, because if you leave it in there and drive in another one, the trans won't shift and you'll have a whole bunch of problems. And then here's the shifter linkage right here. Okay? Let's put that to the side. Now you should be able to pull the tail shaft straight up and off. There you have it. Tail shaft removed. So now we're looking at the back of the trans here. So this is the speedo gear. This is designed to, give you your speed. Now you have to change this depending on your rear end ratio. So it's good to plan out your drivetrain before you put this trans back together, so you can know what gear tooth to use. There's a 7, and then there's an 8, and this particular one is a 6. So you can see here, this is an 8. It's greenish. Usually comes in the SN95 transes, and this is a yellow 7 tooth, and this is the one that comes in the 87 to 93 T5s. Here you'll see is a shipping plug. This actually has no function other than to keep the fluid in the trans when they're shipping it, and this is actually usually at the back of these splines right here, and when you put in the yoke, when you first get it, it slips it forward. This here is the large 5th gear, and this here is the small main shaft 5th gear. This is the reverse fork and 5th gear fork, and this is the synchro right here, the reverse synchro I was talking about a little earlier. Okay, so let's go ahead and remove this speedo, and the reason why we want to remove the speedo now is because it's plastic and it's very delicate and teeth like to try to break off. So, all right, so to remove the speedo, we want to do this first because it's it can get damaged pretty easily because of it's plastic. So I always like to remove them sooner than later. You're gonna push down on this little tab. There's a little tab there. You're gonna push it down towards the shaft. And you just take a little, just lightly tap it up. Don't beat on it, guys. If it's not coming off, something else is wrong. Just tap up. There it is. Okay. Slide the plug off and slide this up and off the shaft. There you have it. And you're going to keep your clip as well. Okay. You need that later. Next, you're going to remove the 10mm bolts that hold the top of the case to the main case. Okay, so there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, there's 8, 9, 10. After you remove those 10, this little tab right here that you see, you're going to take a ball peen hammer and you're going to tap on that tab. It's going to push the whole top of the cover that way. And the reason why you want to go that way is that's how it's removed. It goes away and up, and I'll show you why in a minute. Okay. See? Slid that way. Once you do that, you got to push backwards like that and up, and it will be removed. Boom. There it is. Now, the case cover actually has another function. It actually houses the shift linkage, okay, which is actually pretty cool. This shift linkage here is what's used to shift the gears, and this attaches to the little shifter linkage in the shifter cup and then to your shifter. So you don't actually have to always disassemble this when you're taking apart a T5, unless you have like a broken fork or a bent fork or whatnot. So I'm going to show you guys how to take this apart real quick. It's really easy. So to disassemble this, there's a little punch pin once again right here that you're going to drive out with the ball peen and the pin punch. You got to make sure that it's angled in a way that it doesn't get driven into the case itself. So you want to turn it that way and then drive the pin and with the ball peen, you know, towards the back of the case. Let's go ahead and knock that out real quick. All right. There it goes. Now this is a special pin for the top of the case. It's a little shorter, so you want to make sure you keep track of this. Okay, pull the punch out. What I like to do is I use the punch in the back of the shifter rail here, and all you gotta do is just use it as leverage, and then you just pull backwards. There's your shifter rod. Okay, set that to the side. And you can turn this way. Remove the fork and the key. That's a 1-2 fork and the key. This is the 3-4 fork and the key. Okay, the shift indicator here, and the little slide that it rides in. And boom, there you have it. Disassembled top case. And now we are in them guts. All right, here it is. All right, so now we're getting down to the nitty-gritty part of the main case. So we're gonna go ahead and start by working at the back here. We're gonna remove the big 5th gear, the 5 reverse synchro hub, and the fork, the 5 reverse fork, 5th reverse fork. Okay, so once again, this hand has a couple retaining these little pins. There's a pin right here, okay, that needs to be removed. Okay, see it right there. So we're going to drive that out first. So what I like to do, just so I don't bend the rod, is I'll stick a piece of wood underneath to give it support, and then go ahead and drive it out. Okay. All right. And there's your pin. It's the same length as the one that's in the shifter cup, so you don't have to worry about keeping track of which ones. The only one that's different is the one in the case cover. So now that you've gotten to this point, there is a snap ring back here, also known as the Jesus clip. Why do we call it the Jesus clip? Because you gotta pray to Jesus that thing doesn't go flying in your eyes every time you take it off, man. It is very, very dangerous. So get a good set of quality snap ring pliers and wear your safety glasses or safety goggles, whatever you got, you know, and squeeze and remove. And there it is. After you remove that, you can now take off the tab here, the little ring, the brass reverse synchro, the fork, and hub. Now sometimes it'll come off in pieces and that's fine. And here it is, and that's the number 5 synchro. They're brass, they're never carbon fiber. And then you can slide off the fifth gear. And that's the big fifth gear. All right, so we're looking at the back of the trans here. And before we move on, I decided to get some gloves. I had to run to the store and go buy some gloves because transmission fluid is very, very damaging. It's very strong, has very strong detergents, and it'll actually make your hands swell if you don't wear gloves. So it is strongly advised to wear gloves if you're going to be working on the trans. I forgot to mention that earlier. I'm kind of a bear when it comes to this stuff. I just dive right in. But guys, don't be like me. Put on some gloves when you're dealing with the transmission especially. All right, so let's get into the anatomy here. We have this ring. It's got two little tabs here to stop it from rotating. It kind of gets set in the splines. And it sits inside of this little retaining cup. This kind of stops the whole thing from spinning around and around. It actually gets has this little tab here that allows it to sit in the tail housing a certain way. And then here's the brass synchro. Okay, and we're looking now at the brass synchro on the inside. So there's one on this side and there's one on that side. So there's one here and then there's one over there. One's for the fifth and one's for reverse. Okay. Then you take off the fifth reverse fork. Okay. And this here is a synchro hub. Okay. This is what's used to shift our T5s into, overdrive. And so this one is a fifth reverse synchro hub. So some of the T5s, especially the one of the Foxes, do not have a reverse. They do not have this brass synchro. Okay, so they'll just have one on the inside for the fifth, and on the back there won't be anything. It'll just be a little retainer to keep these little keys in place. All right, so let's go ahead and take this apart. I'm gonna show you guys how to disassemble this as well. Now I want you to be very careful. You're gonna need a little pick. I got a pick here that I found in the junkyard, and there is a C-spring in here. So I don't know if you can see that spring in there or not. So we're gonna go ahead and take that spring out. And be careful, make sure you wear your safety glasses for this part, because it sometimes could go flying. And there it is. That's the C-spring. That's the first part. There is another C-spring on the back end, but you're gonna start noticing that the keys are gonna start falling out. The synchro keys. Now keep track of these. These synchro keys are specific for the fifth reverse. See, here's the other C-spring. So there's two. As you can see, there's two. But these keys here are specific for the fifth synchro hub. They're small. They don't have any wings, and they're very smooth on the sides. Okay, so there's three of those. Okay, as you can see here, let me show you guys. There's going to be three. See? Now, the actual hub assembly itself, you're going to have the outer synchro hub, and the fork rides in this little area here. So you got to make sure that this is smooth. When you're disassembling, you want to make sure there's no damage or anything that got in there. And then this is the inner part of the synchro hub. Now, what I do is just make sure that these are smooth and there's no burrs or anything to know if it's reusable or not. Okay, so for now, we're just gonna kind of just slide them together. See what it slides back and forth, just like this. So it's like you want to go to fifth, boom. You want to go to reverse, boom. See how it slides back and forth. Okay, should be smooth, should not have a problem. Okay, so the reason why it's important to remove this pin is this rod right here is very difficult to get out without removing the pin. Now at this stage, I can actually just take the punch that we use to drive out that pin, okay, and stick it right in that hole, and we can dance it around. Comes from the bottom. You can dance it around and pull it out, okay? And then you see it, it's all damaged, rough and messed up, okay? It's supposed to be helping with shifting, and when it's rough like this, it's really not any good. But Another way to get that out would be to remove this, I guess, bolt slash, rod, I don't know. But the thing is about this is first of all, it's in there pretty tight because it's steel, and the aluminum and the steel, they seem to fuse together. I tend to use heat to get it out when I need to. This one seems to have like a little pin in the middle of it to stop you from taking it out for whatever reason. I don't know why they would need a security pin there, because generally they come like this with no pin. It's a T50 Torx bit. It takes it out, but any T5 rebuilder will let you know that this thing is hell to get out. What I tend to use is I'll use a propane torch. Just kind of use that, heat it up to break the seal between the aluminum and the steel, and it'll come loose. But you definitely have to anchor down the case to get it loose, and it's kind of difficult to maneuver. But in this instance, we're not going to take it out. So now that we've got all the reverse and fifth stuff removed back here, right? We're going to remove the main shaft. Main shaft meaning this part of the trans right here. Okay, it goes all the way through from the front, all the way through to the back. Okay, so with the main shaft, to remove it, just going to want to do a little jiggle. Okay, and you're going to see the rear main bearing removed, or bearing race removed. So what you want to do is set this aside. So then to remove the main shaft here, you're going to kind of want to go up and on an angle. So you want to be careful here. You don't want to just bang it around. I mean, the stuff is tough, but you just don't want to make a habit of banging stuff around in here. So you don't want to move around the... Okay. See it? You put it on an angle just like that, okay? And then you can get it on out of there. Alright. And there it is. That's your main shaft removed with all your gears. Now we have the remainder of the case. So inside the case here, there is a clip that needs to be removed to get the shift lever here, the fifth shift lever. Okay, you're going to see a little clip right here. Okay, so what you want to do is you're going to get some needle nose pliers, and you're going to stick them in there. There it is. And set that aside. This is another little spring clip. All right. So now that we've got the C-clip removed, in this particular trans, there's actually a little bit of mismatched parts in this particular trans here, which actually could have caused a lot of issues why it got ate up actually. So we're going to go ahead and pull this rod out, but before we do that, we're going to remove this spring down here. And this is a spring set up for a non-reverse synchro T5. Okay, and I'll explain the difference in a second. All right, so once we get that off, we're going to remove the little lever for the fork. That's the reverse fifth number 2 fork. There's the one on the outside and then there's the one on the inside. This is the number 2 fork. Okay, and that's a non-reverse synchro fork. Okay, then we're going to go ahead and remove the rod. Okay, boom. Now all you're left with is the reverse idler, just this, the cluster, and the brake sensor down here, the brake light sensor, and obviously this shaft here from that bolt I told you guys I'm not going to fool with. Let me explain the difference between the forks so that you guys do not make this mistake. This mistake gave me the real blues when I first started building T5s quite a few years ago. So I'm going to show you guys the differences between them so that you understand what's going on. So from 1987 to 1993, T5 did not have a reverse synchro. Reverse synchro meaning that before in 87, 93, you had to put the car into fifth and then slam it into reverse to slow the transmission down enough for it to shift without grinding. Okay. They corrected that problem in 1993, actually, in the Cobra only, and then they carried that technology over to the 94, 95 and on transmissions. So 94, 95, and then the 99 to 2004 V6 T5s as well. So the first differences between the two, and I see I clearly marked them because they're hard to tell just off a first glance. But if you stand them up side by side, okay, you'll notice that one is very slightly taller than the other one. Okay, I don't know if you can tell from that angle, but the 94, 95 is slightly taller than the 87 to 93. And the reason being is it's got a different swing on the inner or the number 2 fork inside there. Okay, that's the first difference, is the length. Okay, so make sure that the 94, 95 is for a reverse synchro setup, and the 87 to 93 is for a non-reverse synchro setup. So this here is a non-reverse synchro number 2 fork on the inside of the trans. It's just got a little roller here to right inside the cavity here of the shift lever, and it's got a same little little tab here to hold on this coil spring. Anytime you see one of these coil springs, most likely, or it should be, that your transmission is a non-reverse synchro setup. Okay. Now the other setup you're going to see is a reverse synchro number 2 fork. Okay, so when you have this little spring here that's attached already, that means there is no coil spring that goes on the top, and then there's also a little area here on this roller here, a provision to hold the spring in place. So that's how you can identify this. Okay, the reverse synchro case has a longer area here, it's a little wider, and the non-reverse is a little thinner, as you can see. All right, side by side. You can tell. Okay, so if you put this fork in a reverse synchro T5, it will not shift. You're gonna have a hell of a hard time getting it to go into fifth, and a hard time getting it to go into reverse. Trust me, I've done it before. It does not work. Okay, so this is the proper fork. So make sure that you pay attention to that as well. Okay, so one more thing I want to show you guys before we move on is this here. Is a non-reverse synchro case, and this is a reverse synchro case. And the way that you can tell just by looking at your T5 from the outside is there's a little button here. You see it? There's a little button. On the 87 to 93s, you're going to see, for the most part, it's just going to be smooth here. It might say Borg Warner, but there's not going to be a button there. And the reason why this button is here is actually, it has a purpose. It's got a little tab in there, as you can see down in there, to hold this the other end of the spring. Okay, see this spring here? So it's designed to hold that spring so that it gives a real tight kind of hookup in there, So yeah, if you see this button, it's very, very, very likely that you have a reverse synchro setup. Okay, so now we're on to the stage where we want to remove the cluster, or start working on removing the cluster. So first thing we're going to do is remove these 4 bolts here that hold the bearing retainer in place. So this bearing retainer is very, very weak. I'm going to show you guys how to upgrade this. This is a huge upgrade when you're dealing with higher horsepower T5s, but right now we just want to get it off. So you're going to use a Torx number 40 bit here. Let me show it to you. Okay, this one, as you can see, has been quite abused. I'm really rough on my tools, and honestly, I don't care. I'll just go and get another one. But yeah, so you're gonna get Torx 40 in there. Now, the thing is with these, you're gonna notice that there is these little tabs that stop them from rotating. Okay, I'm gonna bring it up really close. You see these little retaining tabs? Some are folded up and some are folded down. So to get these loose, you're going to take a ball peen and a chisel here and knock those tabs back so that you can actually rotate the bolts. So now One fast way to get that done, if you have access to an impact, impact will do this like really quick, no problem. It'll just push them back because of the force. But I'm trying to show you guys how to do things old school. In case you're, a guy who's you may be poor, man, not have a compressor, or you might not have all this fancy gear, but you can still get it done. So yeah, that's what I'm showing you how to do it this way. All right. So now that we knocked them all back, use a Torx 40 on it. Nice. You get all 4 of these out. Set them to the side, and then now you can remove. And this is a bearing retainer. Look how thin and flimsy this thing is. And this is expected to hold 250 to 300 foot-pounds of torque. I mean, come on. All right. So underneath that, you're gonna have a shim. Keep that. Keep track of that. To the side, it's a good starting point. So when you begin to shim, and then you're gonna kind of yank up on it, and then remove the bearing race. So what you want to do is remove this little cup here so you can actually press down on it without breaking it. So what I have is a little screwdriver that I bent the tip to just kind of get under there and work as a little pry bar. Okay, so here's my little tool. It did its due. And for the rest of the way, I just take some needle nails and just pull it out. And there it is. Okay, I'll set that to the side. To remove this bearing, you're going to need a press. That's one thing I always tell guys, you definitely need a press. There is no way of getting around that. So before you take on a T5 rebuild, make sure that you have access to a press if you're going to change these bearings here. Very often, every time I rebuild a trans, I always tear it down to this point and replace the bearings for good measure. All right, so we have it set up on the press. Just like that. So you're going to have the shaft of the press about to press on the actual cluster itself. All right. Okay. Once you make contact, you're going to just make nice smooth. There you hear it. There it goes. There's a bearing removed. See, the reason why you can't reuse these is, number one, this trans had metal flying around on the inside, so I wouldn't reuse this, number one. And number two, the bearing splitter tends to damage the size of the bearing, even to a point where you can't really notice it. So let's move back over to the workbench. So now that we have the rear bearing removed on the cluster, all you got to do to get it out, pretty simple, is you're going to push back. Okay, you're going to push back on it so you see the gear pop out like that, and tilt it up and out. So just grab it, and there it is. Okay, this cluster is trash. As you can see, the gears have been totally chewed by the input shaft. We have to drive out a pin that's in here. The little pin is right there in that corner. I don't know if you can see that or not, but you see a little pin, so we got to drive that out. That's one of the other pins there, and that'll allow us to take out the shaft here, and the idler shaft, and then the idler itself. All right, so now that we remove that little pin, see that there's the round end of the butt of the shaft right there. So we're going to go on ahead and just push from this side here, okay, and it'll come out the back here like that, and you just kind of grab it, pull out the shaft while holding the idler. That's the reverse idler right there. So you're going to stick that in. And then you got your shaft. Okay, this is definitely another item that needs to be perfectly smooth. And there's also going to be a rubber kind of stopper. I usually squeeze it just to see how, squeeze it and twist it, see if it's any good. And if it stays together, then we're good to go. If it comes all apart, then it's obviously trash. Now, when you're doing the rebuild, this little area right here, this is actually a bearing race, okay? So it would be a good idea to also head over to the press and press this out. So let's go ahead and do that right now. So here in California, we're kind of spoilt as far as corrosion goes. So you won't have to worry about these being in there too tight. But in places like the Midwest or the East Coast where you guys are subject to like rust and corrosion, definitely use something to support the case itself, because the case will try to bow. So you want to make sure that you put like something to kind of just support the case, maybe a steel pipe or something in there as you're pressing down, so that you don't crack the case. There it is. And there is the bearing race removed. So there you have it. For the most part, this is completely disassembled. Yeah, so you don't really have to do much other than just clean it up a bit. As you can see, look at that piece of a gear in there. But yeah, so usually I'll send it to the media blaster and they'll take care of it, and I'll degrease it, pressure wash it and everything. And you'll see when I do the reassembly video how I get down in that department as well.